He fired me and 15 other people 3 days before Thanksgiving, including Mary, who depended on her company insurance to treat the person she loved most. He thought he had all the control. But his arrogance blinded him to the mistake that would cost him everything. The future of him and his company were already in my hands.
My name is Claire Donovan. I worked at that company for 21 years. I helped found it when we were just 5 people in a warehouse. I signed contracts when nobody else had the credit. I trained every manager. I fixed every crisis, and he discarded me on a Tuesday. No explanation. 3 days before the holiday we're supposedly grateful for. But this wasn't just about me. This was also about Mary, and 14 other people he threw away like yesterday's trash. So I did something he never saw coming. But before I tell you how a piece of paper I signed back in 2003 became the perfect weapon, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Because this story, it only gets better. Now let me show you who Brad Kensington was. Brad Kensington was 32 years old when he took over as VP of Operations. MBA from Wharton, 2 years at McKinsey, and a last name that opened doors, Kensington, because his father, Richard Kensington, was a partner at the private equity fund that bought our company 2 years earlier for $47 million. Brad wasn't hired for competence. He was hired because Daddy wanted to prove his son was good for something. And Brad? Brad wanted to prove the same thing. So he did what every incompetent executive does when they want to look impressive. He started cutting costs. Not his costs. Never his. Ours. In 6 months, Brad fired 15 people. 12 of them were over 50 years old. All of them made good salaries. All of them had stories, families, lives. But to Brad, they were just numbers in a report called Cost Optimization for IPO Readiness. The first person Brad fired that I actually knew was Mary Hoffman. Monday, November 18th, 58 years old, 19 years at the company, senior financial analyst. But what mattered to Brad was her salary, $85,000 a year. We can outsource that function for $45,000, he told the CFO. Easy money. Easy money. Mary found me in the parking lot that afternoon. She could barely speak, her hands trembling, holding her car keys. "Claire," she said, her voice breaking. "John started chemo last month. Colon cancer, stage 3. He had surgery in September to remove the tumor, and now he's in chemo to make sure it doesn't come back. The company insurance is the only way we can afford treatment. If I lose this..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I knew exactly what she was saying. If she lost that insurance, her husband would die. Tuesday morning, 3 days before Thanksgiving, I knocked on Brad's door. No appointment, no permission. I was going to make him reverse Mary's termination, or at minimum, extend her insurance through the end of the year. But when I opened the door, he wasn't alone. Todd Brennan, the CFO, was sitting across from Brad's desk. And on the desk, papers. Lots of papers. Colorful graphs. Spreadsheets. A report with big letters that I managed to read for maybe half a second before Todd snatched everything up. Termination savings analysis. Q4 2024. Todd stood up fast, closing the folder. "Claire, didn't know you were coming in." "I knocked," I said, watching those papers disappear into his briefcase. "I'll let you two talk. Brad, send me the final numbers by noon." Final numbers. I didn't know yet what that meant, but something in my stomach twisted. When the door closed, Brad looked at me, irritated. "This couldn't wait, Claire?" "No," I said. "It's about Mary Hoffman." He sighed. That executive sigh that means you're wasting my time with something irrelevant. "What about Mary? You know her husband has cancer. She needs that insurance. Can we reverse the termination, or at least extend her health plan through?" "Claire, this isn't a charity. We're preparing the company for IPO. Investors want lean operations. Mary's salary was $85,000 for work we can outsource at $45,000. It's that simple. Simple, I repeated. Her husband will die if she loses that insurance, Brad. He opened his mouth to respond, and then stopped. He looked at me. Really looked at me. I saw the exact moment the idea entered his head. Actually, Claire, good thing you came in. I was going to call you in this afternoon anyway, since you're here. He opened his drawer, pulled out a folder. My folder. We're eliminating your position too. Effective immediately. Facilities can be outsourced. Your $130,000 salary doesn't justify itself anymore. Clear out your desk by end of day. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just nodded once, turned, and left. As I walked back to my desk, my brain started working. Not with panic. With something colder. More dangerous. Calculation. I made it to the Starbucks parking lot across the street before I fell apart. Not crying. Collapsing. Violent sobs that came from somewhere deeper than my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key in the ignition. 21 years, and he discarded me. Between his morning meeting and lunch. That's when my phone buzzed. Text from Tyler. Mom, what are we doing for Thanksgiving? Can we afford turkey this year? Mason said his family's going to his grandma's place in Vail. I stared at that message for a full minute. Tyler was 10 years old. He had asthma. His inhaler cost $340 without insurance. Insurance I had just lost. And his next refill was due in 8 days. That message did something to me. It transformed the collapse into something else, something harder, colder. I wiped my face, started the car, and drove straight to Becca Torres's office on 16th Street Mall. Rebecca Torres had been my lawyer since my divorce back in 2009. She knew my story. Knew Tyler. Knew how hard I'd fought to rebuild. After his father decided that fatherhood limited his potential and moved to Boulder with a yoga instructor named Sage. Yes, Sage. So when I called Becca Thursday night, voice still shaking, she said, "Come in tomorrow morning, 7:30. Hot coffee waiting. Friday morning." I told her everything. Mary, John, the cancer, Brad, Todd, the papers I'd seen being snatched up. Becca took notes. Methodical, precise. "Those papers," she said, underlining something in her notepad. "You saw the title? Termination savings analysis, something like that. And Todd grabbed them the second you walked in? Immediately, like I'd caught them doing something wrong." Becca stopped writing, looked at me. "Claire, if they documented a financial plan showing the benefit of firing specifically older employees, that's evidence of age discrimination. It's illegal, and it's smoking gun evidence in a class action lawsuit." I blinked. I hadn't thought about that. "You think they did it on purpose? Targeted older people?" 12 out of 15 were over 50, Becca said. All made high salaries. All had 15-plus years with the company. "That's not coincidence, Claire. That's a pattern." Silence. Then she asked, "Do you have any leverage over them? Anything they need from you? Information? Access? Something that gives you negotiating power?" I opened my mouth to say no, and then stopped. Thought. "When the company started," I said slowly, "back in 2003, nobody had credit. Nobody could rent commercial space. So the founder, Dan Harrison, asked me to co-sign the building lease." Becca raised an eyebrow. "You co-signed?" "I signed it myself," I corrected, "because my credit was the only one that was good. Dan said it was temporary, just until they got real funding. But that was 21 years ago." "Claire," Becca said, leaning forward, "do you still have that contract?" I didn't sleep that night. As soon as I got home, after putting Tyler to bed, I went straight to the hall closet. In the back, behind Tyler's old science fair projects and my divorce paperwork, there was a file box I hadn't opened in years. Manila folder, yellowed edges, stapled. September 2003. Back then, we weren't Apex Innovations. We were Mountain Tech Solutions. 5 employees, a converted warehouse near Colfax Avenue, before the neighborhood got fancy with craft breweries and $8 donuts. Dan Harrison sat me down at a Denny's on Colorado Boulevard and said, "Claire, if you don't sign this lease, we're working out of my garage. My wife will kill me." I didn't co-sign. I signed it alone. Just until we stabilize, he promised. We never had that conversation again. Because after that, it was always me who renewed the contract. Me who dealt with the landlord. Me who coordinated every improvement, every repair, for 21 years. And they never removed my name. Never even asked. I opened the document. Yellowed. Small print. Stapled pages. Page 8, Section 4. C. Renewal of lease term must be requested in writing by the tenant, with a minimum of 30 days advance notice prior to expiration date. I checked the expiration date. November 1st. Today was November 22nd, 18 days late. They hadn't renewed. I checked my email. Nothing. No notification, no reminder from legal. Nothing. They'd simply forgotten. I went back to the contract, kept reading. Page 8, Section 7B. In the event of contract breach by the tenant, including failure to renew or default on payment, the co-signatory may assume full tenancy rights and terminate occupancy with 30 days' notice. I read that line 5 times, 7 times, 10 times. Let me translate the legalese. If the company breaks the contract, like, I don't know, forgetting to renew, I, as the co-signatory, can evict them in 30 days. Legally. I sat back in my kitchen chair, staring at that yellowed piece of paper. For 21 years, I'd been the invisible foundation. I signed the lease when nobody else could. I kept the lights on, fixed the systems, trained the employees, and they fired me on a Tuesday without even checking who had signed the lease for the building where they operated a $47 million company. I smiled. Not a warm smile, a dangerous one. Because Brad Kensington had just made the most expensive corporate mistake of his life. And I was the only person in the world who knew it. I called Becca at 10:47 p.m. She answered on the second ring. Lawyers never really sleep. Is the clause still valid? I asked. No preamble. Rustling papers, keyboard typing, send me photos of the contract, pages 6 through 9. I sent them. 2 minutes of silence. Then, holy shit, Claire. Becca never cursed. Is it valid? I repeated. Not only is it valid, she said, her breathing accelerating the way it does when she's reading something that changes everything, since the company was acquired by the private equity fund in 2022, but the lease was never transferred. You're still legally the primary co-signatory, and they missed the renewal deadline by 18 days. Claire, that's material breach of contract. And Colorado is a landlord-friendly state. You can evict them, legally, in 30 days. Silence on the line. Claire? I'm here, I said. Just processing. Are you sure you want to do this? This will destroy the company. It'll create chaos. A lot of people will suffer. I thought about Mary, about John, in chemo, depending on the insurance she'd just lost. I thought about the other 14 people Brad had fired without blinking. I thought about Tyler asking me if we could afford turkey. Send me the forms, I said. I'll file the eviction tomorrow. Tomorrow's Saturday. Then I'll file it Thursday night. Thanksgiving. Becca paused. Claire, you're going to file on Thanksgiving Eve? No, I corrected. I'm going to file on Thanksgiving night, 11:47 p.m. specifically. So the notice gets posted Friday morning. Black Friday. Seems poetic, doesn't it? They treated me like disposable Black Friday merchandise. Now they'll find out what it feels like to be replaced. Thanksgiving was Stouffer's mac and cheese and a Safeway rotisserie chicken, not the turkey I'd promised. Tyler didn't complain. He never complains. You okay, Mom? He asked. His fork paused over his plate. I will be, I promised. After he went to bed, I sat in front of my laptop with a cup of cold coffee. Outside, I could hear fireworks from someone's Thanksgiving celebration. Side? I was about to light a different kind of fuse. I opened the county eviction portal, filled out every field. Plaintiff name, Claire Elizabeth Donovan. Defendant, Apex Innovations Corp. Occupant of suites, 1200 to 1400. Reason for eviction, failure to renew lease, material breach of rental agreement. Relief sought. Immediate vacation of property within 30 days. I attached the original lease. I attached the missed renewal deadline. I attached my termination letter from Tuesday, then I clicked submit and paid the $385 filing fee. The confirmation email hit my inbox at 11:47 p.m. Your eviction notice has been filed. Court date, December 18th. Notice will be posted within 12 hours. I looked at the time, 11:47 p.m., November 21st. In 13 minutes, Thanksgiving would become Black Friday. How fitting. Friday morning, 6:14 a.m. A county marshal taped a bright orange fluorescent paper to the glass doors of Apex Innovations, large, laminated, secured with a plastic zip tie that couldn't be removed without scissors. Notice to vacate premises. Apex Innovations Corp. Failure to renew lease agreement. 30 days to vacate or face forcible removal. Below it, the court date. My name is plaintiff. The property address. All official. All legal. All impossible to ignore. Downtown Denver was silent. Stores preparing for Black Friday sales. Nobody at Apex yet. That orange paper glowed alone on the glass door like a beacon, or a death sentence. At 9:23 a.m., Brad Kensington arrived. Patagonia vest, fresh ski tan from Vail, coffee in hand, whistling. He'd spent Thanksgiving skiing while I filled out eviction forms. He saw the notice, stopped walking. The coffee fell from his hand, splashed on the ground. He stood there, staring at that orange paper like it was a hallucination. Then he tried to rip it off. Couldn't. The plastic zip tie held. He pulled out his phone. Called. Todd, get down here now. We have a problem. A big problem. Todd arrived 12 minutes later. No coffee, no fancy vest, just panic. They locked themselves in Brad's office. I wasn't there, of course, but I know exactly what happened. Because a week later, when everything exploded, Todd told 3 different people, and one of them told me. Brad pulled up the due diligence files from 2022, the audit that he had led when his father's private equity fund bought the company. He opened the real estate and facilities folder, searched for lease agreement, suite 1200-1400. There it was, lease review checklist. Checkmark lease exists. Checkmark rent current. Checkmark expiration date 25. Checkmark signatory Claire Donovan, co-signer with Mountain Tech Solutions LLC. Checkmark status approved notes. Administrative backup co-signer from 2003 formation. No operational implications. Todd read it again. You marked this as approved? Brad was pale. I saw her name. I assumed co-signer meant, I don't know, backup. Some admin person who helped with paperwork 20 years ago. I didn't think it mattered now. You didn't research? Todd shouted. You didn't ask Dan who Claire Donovan was? I was focused on the financials, revenue, EBITDA, customer churn. Real estate is back office stuff. Todd closed his eyes. Brad. Co-signatories on commercial leases in Colorado have full tenancy rights if the primary tenant breaches the contract. And we just breached the contract. Because nobody renewed the lease on November 1st. Because legal thought it was auto-renewal. But it wasn't. And Claire knows this. She filed an eviction, legal, valid, irrevocable. In 30 days, we're forcibly evicted, $47 million in valuation, and we don't have a building to operate out of. Brad, you destroyed the company. Silence. Then Brad whispered, my father's going to kill me. Your father? Todd exploded. The investors are going to sue us. We sold to them based on your due diligence. You guaranteed everything was clean. You said you'd verified everything. Brad sank into his chair. I can fix this. We'll offer her money. A settlement. Whatever she wants. Todd shook his head. Brad, you fired her Tuesday, 3 days before Thanksgiving, after 21 years. And she filed the eviction on Thanksgiving night. She doesn't want money. She wants revenge. The news leaked within 48 hours. Not because I told anyone, because employees started getting calls from clients. Is it true you're being evicted? We heard the company's being sued by a former employee. Are you going to be able to complete our projects? Corporate panic spreads faster than high school gossip. And in tech, reputation is everything. By Monday, 3 clients canceled contracts. Tuesday, 4 more. Wednesday, 2 more. 9 clients total. $7 million in annual recurring revenue. Gone. Some went to competitors. Others came to me. Because I'd spent 21 years building relationships while Brad spent 3 years destroying trust. When you fire the person who solves every problem, people notice. When you fire the person who built the company, people feel it, and they act. I didn't ask them to come, didn't make any sales calls. But when Mark Chen from TechStream called me and said, "Claire, you always solved our problems in 2 hours. Brad takes 2 days just to respond to emails. If you've got consulting capacity, I want to hire you directly." I said yes, because 10-year-old kids need asthma inhalers, and Stouffer's sucks. Friday, 10 days after the eviction notice, I got an email from Richard Kensington, Mountain Capital Partners. Subject: Settlement Proposal. Urgent. Claire, we need to talk. In person. This week. I have authorization from the board to negotiate terms I believe you'll find satisfactory. Please respond within 24 hours. Sincerely, Richard Kensington, Managing Partner. I stared at that email for 5 minutes. Brad's father, the man whose last name had opened every door for his son, was asking me for a meeting. With urgency. I smiled and replied, "Wednesday, December 11th, 10 a.m., your office. Bring your lawyer, I'll bring mine, and bring Brad too. I want him there when we discuss the future of his company. Send." Wednesday came faster than I expected. The Mountain Capital Partners conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Denver. Glass table that probably cost more than my car. Abstract art on the walls that I didn't understand but knew was expensive. Richard Kensington sat at the head of the table. Brad beside him. Pale. Dark circles under his eyes. 20 years older than 3 weeks ago. The corporate attorney, Margaret Chen, opened her folder. "Ms. Donovan, we appreciate you agreeing to meet with us. Mountain Capital is prepared to offer a generous settlement to resolve this matter amicably." Amicably, I repeated. Becca put her hand on my arm. Gentle. Let them speak first. Margaret continued. $200,000. Lump sum payment. In exchange, you withdraw the eviction and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Silence. "No," I said. Richard blinked. "Excuse me?" "No, next offer." Margaret and Richard exchanged glances. "Ms. Donovan, 200,000 is a very—" "I didn't come here to haggle over numbers," I interrupted. "Then what do you want?" Richard asked. Direct. Businessman at heart. I leaned forward. Brad Kensington. Terminated immediately. No severance. No letter of recommendation. Just gone. Brad's head snapped up. He looked at me. First shock, then anger. "You can't." "I can," I said calmly. "Either the eviction hearing happens in 7 days and your company closes, or you choose." Richard raised his hand. Brad went silent. "Continue," Richard said. "Second," I said. "All 15 people Brad fired in the last 6 months get an offer. Come back to their jobs. Full benefits restored. Retroactive to December 1st. Or 6 months severance plus health insurance extension through June. Their choice, not yours," Margaret was writing quickly. "Third, $250,000 settlement. $180,000 for me. $70,000 for an employee medical hardship fund, administered by a third party. Not by you. Mary Hoffman and her husband's cancer treatment get priority." Becca smiled slightly. Proud. "Fourth," I continued, "all hands meeting with all employees. You publicly announced that Brad was terminated for corporate misconduct. You announced the 15 employees are being reinstated. And you publicly thank me for my 21 years of service. Pause. Fifth, I withdraw the eviction, transfer the lease to the company, legally, permanently, and we never speak of this again." Margaret finished writing. Looked at Richard. Richard looked at Brad. Brad stared at the table, jaw clenched. "You want to destroy me?" Brad said, voice low. "No," I replied. "You destroyed yourself. When you led a $47 million due diligence and didn't verify who had signed the building lease, when you fired 12 people over 50 and documented it in a report called Termination Savings Analysis, when you fired Mary Hoffman 3 weeks after her husband started chemo, When you fired me after 21 years because I had the audacity to ask you to have compassion. I didn't destroy you, Brad. I just held up the mirror. Silence in the room. Richard took a deep breath. Margaret, draft the agreement. Ms. Donovan's terms, all of them. Brad turned. Dad. Leave the room, Brad, Richard said, not looking at him. What? You heard me. Leave. Brad looked around. Nobody defended him. He stood up, stumbling slightly, and left. The door closed behind him. Richard looked at me. He's my son, Richard said quietly. But he fucked up, and I know it. You'll get your terms, Ms. Donovan, everything you asked for. While Becca and Margaret finalized the paperwork, I waited in the hallway. Huge windows, Denver below, cold, clear December. The conference room door opened. Richard came out first, stopped when he saw me. For a second, I thought he was going to say something, but he didn't. Just nodded once. Respect or defeat, I don't know, and walked past. Brad came next, stopped in front of me. We stood there, in silence. For 5 seconds, that felt like forever. You happy now? He said finally. I thought about the question. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. No, I said honestly, but I feel at peace. He shook his head. Bitter. 21 years, Claire. You threw away 21 years out of pride. That hit me wrong. I threw it away, I repeated, my voice rising. Brad, you fired me. You fired Mary while her husband was dying. You fired 15 people to inflate numbers for an IPO. I didn't destroy anything. I just refused to let you destroy me. You don't understand how business works, he said. No, I corrected. I understand exactly how it works. Because I built a business, while you just inherited access to one. There's a difference. He opened his mouth to respond, and then a door opened down the hall. Richard, coming out of another room. He saw Brad, saw me, and walked toward us. Brad, Richard said, his voice low but cutting like glass. Clear out your office. Today, you have until 5. Dad, today, Brad. Brad swallowed, nodded, and left. Richard stayed, looked at me. Ms. Donovan, he said, you have every right to be furious. My son made mistakes, many of them. But destroying this company, 127 people lose their jobs, not just him. I know, I said. That's why I didn't destroy it. I could have taken this to the hearing, could have forced the eviction, but I didn't, because those 127 people, they didn't do anything wrong to me. So I gave you an out. Expensive, but fair. I saved your company, Mr. Kensington. From your son. He was silent, then quietly, thank you, and he left. I stood alone in that hallway, looking out the window at Denver below. For the first time in 3 weeks, I took a deep breath and felt like I could fill my lungs completely. Monday, December 16th, all hands meeting, all 127 employees, Richard Kensington at the podium, me in the back of the room, on purpose. This wasn't about me being applauded. It was about people getting back what they'd lost. As you know, Richard began, the last few weeks have been turbulent. Today, I'm here to clarify some things. First, Brad Kensington is no longer with this company, effective immediately, for corporate misconduct and violation of HR policies. Second, the 15 people who were terminated in the last 6 months are being offered immediate reinstatement with full benefits restored, or 6 months severance with insurance extension. The choice is yours. Third, Richard paused, found me in the back of the room. Claire Donovan worked at this company for 21 years. She helped found it when we were nothing. She signed contracts when nobody else could. She fixed every crisis. She trained each one of you, and we treated her in a way she didn't deserve. Claire, thank you for everything. The entire room turned, looked at me. Some applauded, slowly at first, then louder. I didn't smile, just nodded once, because this wasn't victory. It was justice. Different. After the meeting, Mary found me in the parking lot. She was crying, trying to speak but couldn't. I held her hands. John? I asked. John finished chemo in January. Last checkup. No evidence of disease. Ed, no evidence of disease. The most beautiful words Mary ever heard. Now it's just follow-ups, scans, appointments, monitoring. But he's alive and well. And she has the insurance to make sure he stays that way. She hugged me, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I let someone see me cry. 3 weeks later, Tyler and I finally had our Thanksgiving, in December, with a real turkey, and pumpkin pie that I made from scratch and burned a little. But he said it was perfect. I used the $180,000 to pay off debts, create an emergency fund, buy 3 months of Tyler's inhalers in advance, and I opened my own consulting firm, Claire Donovan, Facilities and Operations Management. 5 clients in the first month, 8 in the second. I make less than I made at Apex. But I sleep better. Mary went back to work. John's in remission now. He's doing well. Brad? I don't know. I didn't look him up. Revenge isn't about watching your enemy suffer. It's about reclaiming what was yours. Your power, your peace, your life. For 21 years, I held that company in my hands without realizing it. Not because I signed a piece of paper, but because I was the foundation. And when they tried to discard me like debris, I simply let them discover what happens when you remove the foundation from a $47 million building. It falls. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's remembering your own worth and refusing to become the kind of person who hurt you. I carried that company for 21 years. Now I carry my own life, and it's so much lighter. If you've ever been undervalued at work, if you've ever watched someone you love get discarded by a system that forgot they were human, leave a comment. Tell me, what would you have done? And if you made it this far, if this story touched you, made you feel something, hit that subscribe button. Because I tell stories about real people who faced unjust systems and won. Not with violence, not with cruelty, but by remembering their own value. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share this video. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's remembering you were always stronger than they wanted you to believe. Thanks for listening to my story. And remember, always read the contract.